Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the People's Water Board Water Wednesdays. We get on every Wednesday at noon to talk about the water issues in Detroit and all over Michigan. Today, we are really lucky to, my co-host, Rosalind Walker. Say hi, Roz.
Hi everyone.
And Nicole Hill are with me today.
Hello, everyone.
And we are joined with Megan Douglas. Megan Douglas works for Riverwatch on the editorial team. She also works for Our Future Michigan. And we're going to be talking about some pretty serious stuff today. So we're going to get right into it. We're talking about water infrastructure in Detroit and really all over the country, and the desperate need for it, and how systematic racism and a lack of housing and things like that play into where the infrastructure is actually getting fixed and things like that. So Megan, very important conversation. And we're so grateful that you were willing to come on with us today and have it. So I'm going to jump right in. When we're looking at the new infrastructure bills and things like that, there's a lot of people and a lot of places being left out. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I guess when we're speaking about the infrastructure bills that are being proposed. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's important to pay attention to how these things actually become legislation. So in the original iteration of the plan, there was $111 billion earmarked for water infrastructure needs, right? And so about 55 billion of that is supposed to be going towards like cleaning up lead service lines and providing access to homes. And then the other 55 billion is supposed to be shoring up our infrastructure to, when we have these like major events. In the iteration that just currently passed the Senate, they, I believe, took that down to 35 billion. And this is why what's happening in the House right now is so important with like this idea of budget reconciliation, because whether or not the GOP wants to get on board with actually getting the money to where it needs to go, the House is saying, well, we're not going to pass it anyways unless this the full amount earmarked. And so that's the plan now, is through this process called budget reconciliation, which sounds confusing and weird. And like, what is it? They're saying, no, we're going to make sure that the money gets to where it needs to go. So that's one of the big reasons why, even if you're somewhere and you think you have a Democratic representation or whatever, we still need to be putting pressure to make sure that people that are representatives are behind it and, supportive of it and trying to pass that legislation.
Mm-hmm. It's so important that we get the full amount, especially here in Detroit after all this flooding and the things, like the cities, the infrastructure, it's terrible. The lead, we had problems with lead in the lines at the schools here in Detroit, things like that. What kind of communities are going to be left out, do you think? And how can we fight to make sure those communities are going to be covered as far as infrastructure goes?
Well, hopefully in that $111 billion, over 40% of it is earmarked for low income and rural communities. Okay. So, that I think that is acknowledged that the places that need it the most aren't getting it. Right. And I obviously that's why there would be pushback from certain people, because, when you do things, there's this like line of thinking that making things fiscally solvent or spending money in certain ways isn't prudent, right? So they make decisions that value bottom lines over people's lives. And so I think that's why a big part of these bills are to target, I don't even like saying low income anymore. I say suppressed income, because we need to insert back in that it's something actively being done to people and it's not a passive status. So I think, it's staying engaged. It's like whether or not you think that your elected official is on your side, still sending those messages, right? Like still saying, make sure that you support this. And yeah, I mean, just like we did, where we see people left the city of Detroit to go down to Georgia and knock doors there. We have to ensure that we're looking, not like these issues don't just affect Detroit. If we look across the country, right? One of the things I was reading about in terms of how water infrastructure got to be where it is, right? We have to think that all of these systems were built during a time when intense racial segregation, racism, like all those divisions were just out in the open and okay, right? So they were like, policy was following racism, right? So if you look across the country, anywhere, anytime you have poor Black, brown communities, these issues are there, right? Like, I think I read that something like 1 million people, which is about 500,000 households across the country, don't even have piped water access, right? And of those households, the majority are poor, Black, and brown, and a lot of them are immigrants and then also renters, right? So, it's like, it's not hard to see like how racism, historic entrenched racism is built into baked into our infrastructure. Like, and we can talk more specifically about how that happened in Detroit if you want to.
I would like to talk more about that, but also if you think about, it's so blatant, like in places like Alabama and Mississippi. I talked to Catherine Flowers the other day. She's a water organizer, environmental organizer as well in Alabama. And they never, ever put water infrastructure ever to this in some of the small towns that were all mostly Black towns, and certainly towns that are impoverished, live in endemic poverty. But, so it's like, it was intended that way. And you really hope that they're going to be able to, with this water infrastructure, with this infrastructure bill, be able to help and fix that those types of things. It's just, it leaves people out completely. Nicole, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Yeah, that was funny that you mentioned Alabama because, I've lived in the South for quite some time, either between Alabama and Louisiana prior to me coming up here. And what I've found is the systemic racism is even more than just negating or neglecting these small towns. Even within small towns, you'll see issues where the community where all the Black and brown people coincide together is separate from the white community, and they'll offer assistance and ideas and plans to circumvent this issue to the white community in the same town as the Black community, and just not even bring it up to them at all. So the racism runs very, very deeply, particularly in the South. But what my question that I want to ask, the question that I want to ask Megan was that I know that infrastructure, as well as the other water bills that we have in the House at this time, are all kind of tied together because you really can't have one without the other. Like, we're pushing for clean water, but it doesn't matter if we have clean water if we have a damaged infrastructure. So my thing is, do you think the bill that we currently have that's for transparency would help with what you were saying, making sure that the funds get to the people that need it the most? Because that's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, right? The hope is that if we take some concerted, like if we take a concerted focus and say like, we have to, I guess, so we could preface it on this because it kind of ties into what you were talking about before. One of the so if we're talking, for example, about federal legislation, we could talk about the Clean Water Act that mandated that everywhere is supposed to have clean water, right? Like everybody's supposed to have access to these things. And that happened in the 1970s. But the problem was at that point, so if we talk specifically about Detroit, for example, when the Clean Water Act got passed, and then they're saying, okay, Detroit, DWSD, you're not up to par in Detroit, you have to fix these issues. And then all of a sudden, there's these federal mandate for something to happen, but because of the suppressed incomes in Detroit based on racism, Detroit didn't actually have the money to carry out those plans. So you can have a policy, but if there's not actually the money to implement it, right, then nothing actually can get done. And so I think what's really important about this is that there is now a fact, like when these bills get passed, there will be a federal mandate with funds behind it to actually do the things that need to be done to counteract the racism of why these systems are crumbling and why they've been left to crumble, right? And because they're not just crumbling, they've actively been left to deteriorate because, right, it's baked into, even like if we I was doing a little research earlier about the split between the cost that Detroit bears of supporting the water infrastructure versus the suburbs, right? And so in that 1999 rate settlement agreement, where they determined based on whatever that 83% of those costs should be borne by Detroit and only 17% by the suburbs, where even though, right, all of the spending, the reason that DWSD was in so much debt is because they had put so many resources into developing suburban infrastructure.
Mhm.
Right.
90
So,
municipalities that we service with our
yeah.
literally.
And that money prior to the 1970s. Yeah.
To say, hey, you all can pay everything. It can all fall on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fixing the infrastructure, even though it's out where those 90 municipalities, they won't have to worry about it all. It can fall all on you. And if you don't pay it and you don't like it, we're going to shut you and your whole neighborhood off at one time.
And
Like
I've
that.
even found that
Blatant.
we were on a call between DWSD and GLEWA where they were discussing this very topic. And because some of them are very, let's just say, less than tech savvy, they were trying to close out the public comment to make sure that we couldn't make one and go into a private meeting, but they didn't quite know how to do it. So therefore, me being the person that I am, I stayed on and heard information that I was not supposed to be privy to. And they literally sound like bickering children, because there's the suburban, I think the representative from Oakland County and Macomb County, and they're saying, well, why should we have to pay into infrastructure? It's your infrastructure. Like literally that's what they're saying. And then Gary Brown is like, well, you should contribute to it because you tax on it. And I'm saying, like, how much more do they expect the citizens of Detroit to bear?
Right. And
the suburbs, all those municipalities already get water for wholesale prices while we pay full price. Then you want us to cover the infrastructure that is taxed because we're supplying all of this water to your municipality.
That's right. And then,
it's
with the Detroit Water and Sewage Department, with all the infrastructure that they're doing, they're borrowing the money from outside companies and industries, and they're, raising our water bill. The rates, they keep saying your water rate's going up. That's your water bill going up. What's a water rate? It's a water bill. Mm-hmm. And we're paying for that.
Yep. Yeah, one of the links, if you look at it actually, is the same kind of loans, right? So, and this is why emergency management is so detrimental to people's actual livelihood, because they were allowed to take out the same kind of subprime, the same kind of like subprime loans with psychotic interest rates that crashed everybody's housing, that crashed the housing market. Those are the same kind of loans that DWSD was allowed to take out to
Right.
cover infrastructure development. And the problem was then when they couldn't meet it, and then all of a sudden you have this huge debt now that you're putting on already suppressed income people to take care
Right.
of. And
To
so when
pay
they're
for
talking
it.
about this is money, 40% of DWSD's revenue goes to servicing bad loans, bad debt, and not
the
actually
thing
to
is,
rebuilding the infrastructure and to being able to like, you know, offset some of these costs in equitable ways.
I wonder, and it could be a stretch, I'm wondering if any of the loans to the city came from the mayor's buddy, Dan Gilbert, because he definitely instituted quite a few of those predatory loans on people's homes as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Quite a few. You're talking about like 60% of them were bad loans from him.
I was trying to be,
Bad
you know,
loans.
nice.
They basically stole these people homes from them.
Yeah.
They absolutely
Stole
did.
their homes.
Yeah.
And
Megan,
then,
you
I mean, it's the same thing with the water loans, right? Like those went to private contractors who are buddies of the people who get put in control. And like, then, you know, who cares?
if
We're
we
gonna
don't-
pass the, you know, whatever, it's gonna,
Like, you know, like that's like when they in the Olympics and they keep passing the time thing. Because if you look at it, they just going in circles. You have Mike Dugan or whatever his name is. He was in the medical field. Now he's the mayor. Then you have
Oh
Gary
yeah, he
Brown.
ran DMC into the ground.
He was in law, you know, in law firm. Now he's running the water. You know, they just keep it going in a circle, you know, which to me, I think is, you know, it's all in the game, you know, to keep us like confused, you know. And
Oppressed.
well, I mean, think about it. The judge who presided over Detroit's,
Judge Road.
well, I'm talking about a federal judge who was appointed to
Oh.
make sure that Detroit kept up with meeting the Clean Water Act standards, right? So this person, this judge appoints somebody to head that effort, this guy Mercado. Well, it turns out, if you know this name,
Mercado?
the one who was
Oh, the one.
charged for all that corruption, right? And so by the time it gets sorted out and Detroit is about to get back control over its water, guess what happens? An emergency manager gets appointed.
Emergency manager, right.
Exactly.
Right. So right at the moment where Detroit would have been able to take back from, you know, the conclusion of this case, this 30-year long court case, then
Right, here-
they appoint an emergency
Bring in
manager.
an emergency manager.
What they do is they're using placeholders
Right.
to accomplish what they want to accomplish.
And there's no accountability. All of those
Yeah.
debts that are incurred, all of those, like, you know, those don't go away.
Mm-mm.
You
No,
know,
they
they don't just go away, you know, so.
No.
There was
But they-
like millions of dollars that had been raised that Victor Mercado had control over, and it just
It didn't disappear. It went into his fund for his case.
And
Yeah.
then the
I mean,
emergency
think about it
manager,
like
the emergency manager, he lived good. He lived up in the hotel. What is it?
$100 an hour.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. $4,000.
and then
Wow.
the thing is that
Pardon me,
what
Val.
people are so easily placated by what they're being told, and not they're having a trust of our government, which, you know, sadly they're still human, and people need to realize that you can't trust every human being, because all people heard was Victor Mercado went to jail. It didn't cross anybody's mind to vocalize, well, what happened to all that money if he went to jail? It was just like, oh, he went to jail, problem solved. Where's the funding?
Yeah, well, Rob, you were thinking of the Westin. They put him up at the top of the Westin downtown.
Right, the
Right.
penthouse.
It's
Right,
$800
for $4,000 a month.
to rape our city.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
For $4,000 a month. And we pay for
He
that.
paid $4,000 a month. Way. And he was
That
getting
was
paid.
just for the hotel cost. That wasn't including his fee
Yeah, no, we made,
his salary.
not that it
Right,
matters.
but I'm just
Hey.
saying his living quarters alone.
Yeah.
Which one of us could live like that? None.
No.
Mm. You
And then we
know,
have the
and that's
question
just
of the
like
infrastructure being
that's just like the
damaged.
people that we did vote for us in office, like the governor, Big Gretch or whatever they want to call her. She went against us too with Proposal P. You know, here we have all these people going against us that we vote in.
Mhm.
So we don't know. We got to fight for ourselves.
Yeah.
And what's right for us, and what's right for all humans.
Right.
You know.
Well, and I think what just happened too with Proposal P really indicates, I think sometimes we think because we're in these spaces, and it can be an echo chamber, right? Like we hear each other and we're in these spaces. And so we think that these messages are getting out beyond our circles in a bigger way. But the amount of money that is coming from the other side to suppress those messages, we really have to remember that, like, it is kind of like a David and Goliath situation. And I think so much misinformation. I don't really understand how anybody could have not seen the value in something like Proposal P.
They were hoodwinked because of the finances that the opposition had. They were able to get the word out about voting against it while we were still waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision.
I mean, it was the top, when you typed in during that period, and I'm not sure if it's still that way, but when you typed in during that period, Proposal P in Google, the first link, which means I don't even know how much money you have to spend to have that happen, was why you should vote no on Proposal P.
Right.
And so to counteract that, and then also people didn't come out to vote.
No,
they didn't. I think we had maybe like 9% of Detroit come out
and actually
vote.
I've heard it's lower. Yeah.
Well, you have to look at it like this. A lot of people had absentee ballots, and then also a lot of people that don't come out and vote in August usually come out in November.
People got to start voting in primaries. We got to stop excusing it. Yeah.
But you know what?
And that's another thing I need to stress. People don't think that the primary matter. It does matter. And I always vote in the primary.
I'm not going to be facetious and offer people excuses for their behavior. Now, what I will say is maybe some of these younger kids, the very first time voters,
people that don't
18s
know,
to 20 something may not know, but I know that anybody 35 and up that went to a public school knows basic government. And they know that when you vote in the primary, that has a direct effect on what happens.
A lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people don't know that. And one big thing about Proposal P, it wasn't going to be on November ballot. And a lot of people didn't know that. Now that's where
I know people didn't know the information about Proposal P,
right.
But most of the people I spoke to, and I spoke to a whole lot of people, knew basic government. They knew the importance of voting in the primary. People, let's be honest, it's a tradition in our community, sadly, that a lot of people are like, well, a few people are working on it. And I've literally heard this out of people's mouths. Yes, this is an issue. Yes, we need to make change. Yes, we need to do this, but you're doing it. It takes more than just us. It takes all of us as a collective to push things through. And people can't just say, well, these group of people are working on it. I'm just going to sit back and see what's going to happen with them. You got to get out there too. It's always a way, I tell people, for you to get involved. A lot of
seniors that was bamboozled and they were confused.
Exactly.
And a lot of them had already mailed their ballots in, the ones that I knocked on their doors. And when I had explained to them, they said they didn't know and that they would, go in November. And I'm like, no, it's not on the ballot for November. So you have like 80% of senior citizens that did not know too much about Proposal P, and they did not know that it wasn't going to be on the ballot for November. And they know that they swindled us with that one there.
And I'll give you that they probably did not know that it wasn't going to be on the ballot in November, and they probably didn't have a lot of positive information that explained what Proposal P was. But I guarantee you that some of those very seniors that you went to, because I went to a couple seniors' houses that when they're up in their 90s and they have been school teachers and they knew the importance of voting in the primary, but they didn't.
Because
I
at
went,
this point, oh, Valerie Jean, go ahead.
well, we only got 5 minutes and I wanted to just get maybe one last question in with Megan, if it was possible. You know, when these funds, the federal funds come in, Megan, is the mayor going to have control over the funds that come to Detroit, or is the governor, or is there going to be, is that stuff that we're going to have to fight to get from them? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, right now, all of the details of like how these actual things, you know, they're just trying to get the budget passed for it at this point. It would most likely be federal funds coming to the state, and then like the governor would be figuring out how those get allocated. But given that they're earmarked for communities with certain income like bases, I would hope, you know, you can you never want to say exactly, you know, exactly 100% how everything is going to shake out. But I think, you know, we can't look, I think nobody in the state can look and say what's happened with the flooding in Detroit, and what's happened, but the flooding across Michigan, quite frankly, right? That there are certain areas that just have to be prioritized.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, we're not, you know, because, you know, this isn't just to an issue of like systemic infrastructure racism. It's also about environmental, right? It's also about environmental racism and environmental elitism, right? So, you know, people doing things in a certain community and it's hitting other communities even harder. So, and that takes everybody offline. So, I mean, it's literally like these things are in everybody's interest to fix, right? When you have people who can't get to work because the roads are flooded, or having health issues because there's no water in their home, that reduce, you know, even if we're a capitalist society, even if you don't agree with it, right? Like, that's what we are. And so even for somebody who's self-interested, fixing these things makes sense because it keeps people healthy. It keeps insurance premiums lower when people don't have to be in the hospital all the time because they're sick, because they don't have clean water. Right. It keeps people going to work. So we have a more productive society. Right. Yes. So even if you are a self-interested capitalist, putting money into suppressed income communities is in your best interest.
Absolutely.
I'll know that.
Yeah.
I always tell everybody that I meet, there's only two ways this issue affects you, but it does affect you. Mm-hmm. You can't slide past. It's either directly or indirectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think we can't have looked around at what's gone on over the last year, where we're facing a deadly disease in our communities.
Yes.
And a big part of the problem was just people's inability to properly take care of themselves and have proper hygiene at home, on top of, you know, all of the other factors that come with living in an inner city and who they think deserves to live in certain places and what they should put up with when they live there. But, you know, I think it should be.
I know, clean and affordable water for all.
I'm hoping that once this passes, we can have you back on. We can have this conversation about what it looks like to make sure that the stuff is being allocated and what folks can do.
And it would be great to bring one of the legislators on too, to say, hey, how are you gonna?
Yeah.
Put it on the hot seat. Absolutely.
Are all of these residents and everybody that needs this money is gonna be able to get to it, and where it can help them with their
Fight for it.
issues as far as their bills and as far as anything that they might need because of this flooding and clean water situation and lead pipes and infrastructure, you know.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you increase the infrastructure's capacity, then the rates will go down, right?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you have, if you like, if you actually have an equitable way of distributing the resources. I mean, there's also some other changes that need to be made, and the suburbs really do just need to be also subsidizing the costs of at a
Right.
way greater rate than what they're doing. But
Yeah.
you know, having a strong infrastructure will only make it better for everybody. Mhm.
We'll end on that note. It's 12:30. Like I said, I'm looking forward to having you back and having this conversation after the money's been given to the states, and let's see how we can have this conversation more deeply and push for that money to go where it needs to go. I thank you so much, Megan, for coming on today. And next week, we're going to be talking to Jan Cornstalk about Line 5 and the Resistance and the Water is Life Festival and the flotilla, all the good things that are happening around the Line 5 resistance in the indigenous communities. So we welcome everybody to come back next Wednesday and be a part of the show. And please leave comments and ask questions below. I'm going to post Kate Levy's movie, Detroit Mines Dying. It's a water documentary. And it kind of explains a lot of the things that that Megan was talking about. And it breaks down like the bondholders and the banks and the emergency management and how all that played into this and where we are now. So I'm going to put that in the comments. Everybody else leave a comment and please share. And thank you to my two favorite co-hosts in the world, Nicole and Rosalind.
You are so welcome, Valerie Jane, to my favorite Val. And
My two favorite co-hosts in the world, Nicole and Rosalind. We got playback.
welcome, Valerie Jane, to my favorite.
That's funny. We got playback.
Ew.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
Thank you to you all
Thank
for
you,
being
Megan.
here. I appreciate you coming on, Megan. And this is definitely vital information that the community needs.
And thank you. And what I'll do is I'll put a link in the comments to where people can go and send a message to your legislators as well.
Oh,
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Megan.
Thank you.